Hello, this is Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynicя, The Well, a podcast series about topics of interest to Ukrainians and friends of Ukraine around the world. Today is Tuesday, January 6th, 2026. This episode is produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. Our guest today is Anastasiia Vlasenko, who is the vice president of the NGO Brave Generation and head of the Horizon European Research Program. Welcome, Anastasiia. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm good. First of all, thank you so much for having me here today.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you for joining us. To start off with, can you talk a bit about your educational and professional background?
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Kherson, which is south part of Ukraine. And Kherson was my home for my entire childhood and teenage years. I was still a student when the full-scale invasion started in February 2022. And within days, Kherson became one of the first administrative centers seized by Russian forces. And started on March 1st, we were living under occupation. So everything happened extremely fast. And because of my parents' work and their clear pro-Ukrainian position, living in the city was not simple or safe for us. We tried to escape more than once, and in May 2022, we attempted to get out of the city, but we were turned at Russian checkpoints. So in total, I spent more than 6 months under Russian occupation. And by August 2022, the situation was getting even more intense, and we were finally found a way out. And, I was lucky because a Western organization that was helping people to escape. And back the time, my tutor, she volunteered for that and she navigated us how we can proceed. So I found a way for myself and for my mom to escape the city. And back that time, it was no longer possible for us to leave through the Ukrainian controlled territory because it was too late. And so we had to escape through Crimea, then Russia, then Belarus. And I was interviewed, as Russian call that, by the officer for more than 18 hours at the Russian-Belarus border. And when we finally made it to Europe, I first stayed in Berlin with my relatives at that stage. I did not just feel displaced, but I felt like my entire life was just destroyed. And after that, I rebuilt my educational pathway in Prague and began focusing on my work and how to support Ukrainians abroad and communities affected by war. And because I felt the need, and I still do that as my main focus. And I live right now between Prague and Berlin, and study international and diplomatic studies at Prague University of Economics and Business. And professionally, I served as a vice president, Brave Generation, and Ukrainian nonprofit supporting war-affected youth through mental health support, education, and mentorship and leadership development, so young people can heal and continue their learning and become leaders in Ukrainians' recovery. So I would say it's my main focus for our mission.
Anastasia, why did you choose to go to Prague? Do you have family there?
Oh, I did not. And Prague was my not first stop. I came to Berlin first simply because I needed a safety, in Europe and family support. But Prague became the place where I could rebuild an educational pathway and began working publicly and professionally. So when I would add important detail, when I needed to continue my education, I didn't even have my basic documents. My high school diploma was not accessible to me during the occupation in my hometown. Its paperwork remained outside the occupied area and was never delivered to Kherson. And my biometric passport was burned in the office in Kherson in the first days of full-scale invasion. So I arrived in Europe, not only displaced, I arrived without a paperwork that normally provide proofs that you achieved something in your life. So I received an invitation to continue my studies in Prague with the scholarship support from Boris Nemtsov Foundation. And I enrolled at Prague University Economics and Business University, and I committed myself to learning Czech. I had zero relatives here, and I learned Czech seriously enough to communicate, work, and integrate into daily life. And over the time, I feel that Prague started to feel like not a temporary shelter, but like second home. So I'm trying to support my mission here. The Ukrainian community is pretty large here, more than over 400,000 Ukrainians living right now in Czech Republic.
Anastasia, talk about the Ukrainian community there. Are people in the Czech Republic generally hospitable towards Ukrainians?
Oh, first of all, I have to say that when I moved in 2022, the station looked completely different. And I would say that right now people are trying to help as much as they can because the new government came to Czech Republic since the beginning of 2026. And I feel the situation is looking completely different on media right now. But people who helped, who initially started to help others, Ukrainians who were fleeing the war, they are pretty open, and they were trying to house them in their own houses. For me, it sounds so real, in my own way. And I feel that the Ukrainian community here is really strong, and is large and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians living here right now. Many are them working, paying taxes, raising children. And in my experience, Czech public response has been deeply supportive, especially at the human level. So, of course, public moods can shift, the political dynamic can change as well. But my lived experience in Prague has been one of real solidarity and has helped me to keep moving forward.
So please talk a little bit about your international and diplomatic studies. You mentioned you're doing that in Berlin,
No, I'm doing that in Prague
in Prague.
University.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. What does that entail?
Absolutely. So, I will probably begin that my studies in Prague give me this framework to understand what I lived through. So that the reason why I choose international field. And for me, it's not theoretical, it's deeply personal. And alongside of my studies, I represent Ukrainian youth in international settings, including through my role as a young European ambassador. I speak about what occupation does to young people, what is displacement does, and what recovery actually requires. That is not only about rebuilding infrastructure, but rebuilding human capacity. And I also had opportunity to support Czech Republic initiatives related to Ukraine's reconstruction within the government representatives Tomáš Kopečný from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the core of my work is bridging, translating the reality of Ukrainian youth who is right now, facing the war reality on the daily basis, trying to put that to the language that decision makers understand and trying to find the international support and find the opportunities for young people who is trying to keep their future alive.
So tell us a little bit about the NGO Brave Generation. When was it founded? Why? And what are some of its programs?
So Brave Generation is a Ukrainian American nonprofit that was launched in 2022. And our founder and president is Tatiana Kotelnikova. And Tatiana was displaced twice by war, first in 2014 when her hometown Horlivka in eastern Ukraine was occupied, and then again in 2022 when the full-scale invasion forced her to flee Kiev, and later she relocated to New York. So that's the reason why our organization found in the US as well. And I would say that our mission is coming from our personal stories. And when people ask what we do, I explain that very simply, we are trying to help war-affected Ukrainian youth heal, learn, and lead. And what we do today by combining what young people actually need to move forward, which is mental health support, mentorship, educational pathways, and leadership development. So they can rebuild their lives to be ready to contribute to Ukrainian recovery at the next generation of change makers. And we providing the trauma-informed mental health support, individual and group formats, because we see that because without emotional stability, everything else becomes harder. We're trying to build a structured mentorship, that includes connections with students in the US. So participants don't just receive, the advices. They are trying to gain, the support all of the way on their, enrollment to the university, starting from their motivation letters, CVs, and some career opportunities and so on. They are receiving this support, and we're trying to provide that, and as far as we focus on our leadership development as well, because we're trying to build the community of future leaders for Ukraine. And we were running actually Ukrainian Recovery Youth Initiative in partnership with Yale International Leadership Center. And it includes specialized training and internship placements as institutions, Wilson Center, US Congress. So young leaders gain practical experience and policy exposures connected directly to Ukrainian recovery. And we track impact seriously. For us, like it's something that truly matter. And since we started, we had over 500 participants. Our students and us, we facilitated over 16.2 million into university scholarship. And we're trying, to provide this mentorship, mental health support. And for us, it's a key matter. And our flagman program, Mentor Ukraine, provides personal support. It's starting with university application guidance, coverage of exam and application fees when it's needed, test preparation, mental health support, everything, mentorship. To get them access, to the education, we have to imagine that people who lost everything, they were affected by war more than 10 years, some of them. We have plenty of students from eastern part of Ukraine. And, when you listening to their stories, you're realizing why it is matter, and we're trying to involve not only people in Ukraine internally, but also to work with Ukrainian youth abroad. And we were running this year Impact UA program together with Razum for Ukraine. And it placed students into hands-on internship with Ukrainian NGOs. So we brought us US students and Ukrainian ones to Ukraine, to cities like Lviv, Ivano-Frankivsk, for them to gain, first-hand experience to see what is Ukraine during the war. And also it helps build a new generation of advocates for Ukraine across the United States and globally. So under everything, what we do is a commitment to quality mental health support. We invest in professional capacity. And our psychological support team, it's specialist who knows how to work with young people who were affected by war, which is really, vulnerable group. And I just want personal note, because for me, it's not abstract. I'm from Kherson. I lived through months under occupation, and we escaped to Europe just weeks before a missile destroyed my family home. So when I talk about youth not being left alone, I think I'm not speaking in the theory matter. This work is how I turn what happened to me into protection and opportunity for the next young person, so they don't have to face the war and its aftermath by themselves.
Anastasia, can you briefly tell us about the Horizon European Research Program?
So the Horizon European Research Program, it's the work that I led, concluded in November 2025. And we see for sure the continuation in the future. The primary focus was the research initiative on disinformation in Czech Republic, specifically how Russian propaganda narratives enter Czech public discourse, and what risk pose of freedom of speech, democratic resilience, information security. And major part of the work was conducting interview with high-level Czech and EU stakeholders to inform evidence-based recommendations. So this include Czech politicians and officials, analysts, professors, and so on, including also figures involved in Ukrainian-related policy and reconstruction coordination, as well as senior diplomatic representatives. So the point was not simply to describe disinformation, but to understand vulnerabilities and pathways so response can be realistic and can be targeted.
Anastasia, we're just about out of time, but I do have a final question. Do you have plans to return to Ukraine if and when the Russian invasion ends?
So I returned to Ukraine several times a year because my relatives are there. And part of my family is still in Kherson. My father is 76 years old, living in our friend's house. He remains there. He volunteers and helps people locally, even under constant risk and attacks. At the same time, it's difficult for me to speak about returning in a simple way because the home I would return to no longer exists. It was destroyed by a missile shortly after we escaped, so I don't have a kind of home base that many people imagine when they talk about return. In the long term, yes, I see my future in Ukraine. And what I can promise is commitment. Whether I'm in Prague, Berlin, or in Ukraine, my work is about ensuring that Ukrainian next generation survives this war with their dignity, education, and capacity intact. And I believe that supporting Ukrainian youth is not charity. It's strategic, human, and urgent because the future of Ukraine depends on whether young people can continue their learning, healing, and leading even while the war tries to take that away. So, yes.
Anastasia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be part of this.
I have been speaking with Anastasiia Vlasenko, Vice President of the NGO Brave Generation and head of the Horizon European Research Program. This episode has been produced for The Ukrainian Weekly, a newspaper published in English for the global Ukrainian community since 1933. And I'm Mike Burek, your host and producer of Krynytsia. Until next time, that's all for now.